We are live.
Okay, great. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
We are live.
Great. Okay, great. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
We are live.
Great. Is there a lag? Okay, great. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hold on. Okay. Now we're good. Hi, and welcome to the new Center for Research and Practices public session with the programmers. The new center is a para-academic institution that offers cutting-edge seminars on art, philosophy, and the humanities in general. Within it, we offer 4 certificate programs, each of them led by one of our programmers. So transdisciplinary studies by Jason Mohaghegh, critical philosophy run by Reza Negarestani, art and curatorial studies by Cécile Malaspina, and post-planetary universal design by Keller and Carla Leitão. We also have Raphael here, who is responsible for student services at the new center and will clarify some frequently asked questions and respond to any queries you might have about the process towards the end of today's session. My name is Anchal Saxena, and I am a certificate student at the new center, and I'm also studying situated practice at the Bartlett School of Architecture at UCL, and I'm really excited to be a part of this public session that inaugurates Spring-Summer 2023 and the 9th year of operations of the new Center for Research and Practice. As some of you may know, applications for the certificate programs are currently open with the possibility of receiving full and partial scholarships. And if you're considering applying, this is a great chance to know about the new center as an institution, to meet the programmers, and also know more about the upcoming seminars. As some of you may have noticed while trying to access the website, 2 days ago, our server was severely attacked, causing the newcenter.org and #org to be disconnected from our database. Since then, we're working with our hosting company to migrate our operations to a faster and more secure space. This process luckily did not affect our archives and should be concluded sometime today. So if you're applying for a certificate scholarship, please use the direct link to the application form, which we will post in the live chat. Just a reminder that applications are open until the 20th of February, 2023, 23:59 ET. And they should include a cover letter and a writing sample, showcasing your intellectual interests and clarifying your need for financial relief. Applicants from the Global South will be automatically considered for 50% scholarships. Half of our full scholarship recipients are from the Global South and half are women. Mindful of the recent political contestation taking place in Iran, we are happy to extend this consideration to Iranians and people of Iranian descent as well. A little bit about the new center. The new Center for Research and Practice is an international nonprofit higher education institute in the arts, humanities, and sciences, offering graduate and professional development level certificate programs, workshops, seminars, exhibitions, residencies, and conferences in art and curatorial practice, critical philosophy, post-planetary universal design, and transdisciplinary studies. Our carefully selected network of thinkers and scholars advise and assist those seeking to make the transition between undergraduate and graduate schools, between graduate school and the professions, and between early career to advanced career development. Through studying at the new center, students practice graduate and professional level research in a manner that does not interrupt their existing artistic, academic, or professional aspirations, but instead complements, enhances, and intensifies them. If you're interested in knowing more about us, our programs and upcoming seminars, you can check our YouTube channel and also access our website. And if you have any questions that might not be answered along with the presentations, please just write them in the YouTube chat so we can read them after. Now to introduce our programs and programmers. Starting with Jason Mohaghegh is responsible for our transdisciplinary studies program. It explores the unique collision between literature, poetry, anthropology, psychoanalysis, cultural studies, media theory, the arts, sciences, design, and vernacular knowledge by engaging with strategies that capture complexity, cultivate new ecologies of knowledge, and affect individual and collective transformations. This program can be considered as an alternative to cultural studies or comparative literature. This program will include a seminar by Jason titled The Child's Imagination, Studies of Cinematic Fantasy, a seminar by Lindsay Lerman titled Non-Knowledge, Introduction to Open Economies of Knowledge, and a seminar by Will Scarlett titled Notes from Immediate Irreality. Reza Negarestani is responsible for the Critical Philosophy program, which is devoted to developing philosophy adequate to addressing the problems and questions posed by the 21st century, mainly the necessary transformation of concepts of reason and thought as they pertain to the development of AI and automation. This season, Reza will offer a seminar titled The Impetus of the Soul, Hume's Philosophy of Force and Vivacity. The offerings also include Exuberance and Extinction on Why Anything Matters by Peter Wolfendale, Hegelian Logic and Analytic Philosophy by J.P. Caron, Money, Desire, and the Body, Economic Exchange and Perversion by Anna Longo, Learning How to Die, Socratic Discipline and the Philosophical Life, Part 2 by Daniel Sacilotto, sorry, my bad. And Kant's Critique of Judgment, Purposiveness, the Beautiful and the Sublime by Francisca Ainer. Cécile Malaspina is the programmer of our Art and Curatorial Practices program. Her program addresses the paradigm shifts brought on by new media technologies, but also cultivates historical analysis, given that documented pasts are alive to us, both in the normative assumptions of arts institutions and in its speculations for the future. By studying in the Art and Curatorial Practice program, students and researchers will be able to account for the transformation of the meaning and practice of art in the 21st century and play a key role in shaping new possibilities provided by these changes. At this program, she will be teaching the second installment of her survey seminar titled Techne Beyond Monoculture, which explores the concept of technics. We will also have a seminar offered by Mi Yu and Gary Zhang on cybernetics and China, and a seminar by Vali Mahlouj exploring exhibition making and archival practices titled Archaeology of the Final Decade, System Design in Research and Exhibition Making. For the fourth program, we have Keller and Carla Leitão, who are responsible for post-planetary universal design, which investigates how design practice can operate as a way of thinking, projecting, and enacting structural changes in the world by entirely reimagining environmental paradigms, as well as the integration of disciplines and practices that produce them. Ed and Carla will be teaching the seminar Open Worlds Universal Design, Geopolitics of the Multiverse, focused on the impact of AI and emerging infrastructure on world making. This program will also feature a seminar by Kezis Varnelis titled The Age of Computational Desire Towards a New History of Culture in the 2020s, which aims at understanding the relevance of the internet to everyday life, culture, and economy. Of course, as you can tell, many of these seminars have topics that traverse the programs. And if you check our website, you will see that many of them are cross-listed and don't belong to just one program. And now to start with the presentations, I'll tell you briefly about each programmer before passing the mic or the Zoom screen to them. First, we have Jason Mohaghegh, programmer of Transdisciplinary Studies. Jason is Associate Professor of Comparative Literature at Babson College. His scholarly focus is upon tracking currents of experimental thought between the Middle East and the West, with particular attention to exploring the concepts of chaos, violence, illusion, disappearance, and apocalyptic aesthetics. He has published several books, including The Chaotic Imagination, New Literature and Philosophy of the Middle East, Inflictions, The Writing of Violence in the Middle East, and The Radical Unspoken, Silence in Middle Eastern and Western Thought, to name a few. He is also the co-editor of the Suspensions book series with Bloomsbury Press and the co-director of the 5th Disappearance Lab. Please, Jason, can you tell us more about the program and the seminars?
Thank you so much, Anshan. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. You know, I wanted to begin talking about the theme that is sort of the overarching matrix of what's happening in transdisciplinary studies this term with a quick story. It was about 25 years ago, almost to the date, I was 18 years old, and I read a work that to this day remains the most elegant and devious text of narrative genius that I ever came across. It was a book, a novel by an Iranian avant-garde writer, Sadegh Hedayat, named The Blind Owl. And it's just a hypnotic, remarkable work of labyrinthine sort of language and trance-like imagery. And there was something that he said in it, I remember, and I wanted to just share my screen and sort of go to a slide here, because this defined, to be honest with you, it helped define my entire intellectual life and creative life. So you see that that's Sadegh Hedayat in the lower right-hand corner, and he writes in the text, right in the first pages, he says, "Will anyone ever penetrate the secret of this disease which transcends ordinary experience, this reverberation of the shadow of the mind, which manifests in a state of coma like that between death and resurrection, when one is neither asleep nor awake? Idle thoughts, perhaps, yet they torment me more savagely than any reality could do. Do not the rest of mankind who look like me, who appear to have the same needs and the same passions as I, exist only in order to cheat me? Are they not a mere handful of shadows which have come into existence only that they may mock and cheat me? Is not everything that I feel, see, and think something entirely imaginary, something utterly different from reality? I am writing only for my shadow, which is now stretched across the wall in the light of the lamp. I must make myself known to him." So this book, which begins with a dedication to writing for the shadow, it unfolds in sort of a brilliant architecture of storytelling and of philosophical speculation. And on any given page of this work, you're on a different rung of the ladder of the unreal, of a kind of radical unreality. So on some pages, he's in a dream state. Some you have the nightmare, then there's the daydream, hallucination, simulation, mirages, apparitions, fantasies, reflections, illusions, virtuality even exists there, memories, shadows, holograms, and then there are liars throughout as well. 25 years ago, I realized that one of the greatest tasks I thought that lays before all of us in our current era, but in any epocality, would be to wage a certain war against reality. Well, it took 25 years in a strange synchronicity that wasn't planned for 4 instructors that were solicited to make proposals to the new center this term to come up with, in a bizarrely coincidental fashion, different tactical, you could say, assaults against reality. And I'll show you then I'll give you a quick tour of those 4 so you can see this. And And I was thinking of my dear colleague, brilliant colleague, Ed Keller, who's here, because I know that he's a rock climber, a professional level rock climber. And there was something that I had read a couple of years ago that I meant to ask him about, which is something called the third man factor, which is an experience that certain rock climbers have, that when they get to a certain level of altitude sickness, when they get really close to the top of the mountain, the air is thin and they get vertigo and they can no longer even tell up or down. They fall into a state of extreme despair and a kind of state of emergency. And it's at that moment that it's often been observed that a guide emerges. A figure suddenly crosses their paths who calms them down and leads them to the top of the mountain, at which point, when they reach the summit, this figure disappears. And they realize that it's a projected figment of their own imagination, which is to say they essentially hallucinated a third figure or a second figure. It's called the third man factor, this syndrome, but it's a secondary figure, a complementary figure who would somehow be wiser, calmer, more tranquil, more cunning than they would be. And we do this all the time when we talk to ourselves. You know, who are we talking to? We're talking to someone who's sort of in an elevated position of wisdom and of serenity and intelligence. And that is a bizarre human capacity of our consciousness, then, the ability to split ourselves into radical illusions that are more intense, more enchanting, more striking, more seductive, more intelligent than we are. And so for me, this is part of the basis. This is something that's going to be explored throughout. By the way, children know how to do this exceptionally well. They have their imaginary friends. That's the lighter side. And then they also have, we know this from the horror films, like Exorcist. We also know that they have the dark side of it, which is the psychosomatic capacity to become demonically possessed, right? So anyway, all of these just make us more interesting than the human all too human. And what I found was the three other instructors, while I was finally plotting that after 3 years as a programmer for transdisciplinary studies for the New Center, I decided that I wanted a class that was essentially going at the throat of reality itself. And then I found that the three other wonderful people that I invited for the semester essentially crafted and sculpted a similar plot from their own different vantage points from four corners of the earth. So the first that I wanted to share with everybody is Will Scarlett's seminar, four-week seminar titled Notes from Immediate Irreality. And you can see that the weeks are divided into terms like imaginary presence, week 2, sensory movement, week 3, metamorphic flicker, and week 4, inhuman vision. But what Will has done quite brilliant, he's a wonderful emergent thinker, an author whose dissertation work formerly was on virtual reality and ideas of presence, just stunning work that he's done. But what Will decided to do was, and this is why I wanted to start with his seminar first, because it's always good in a fairy tale, you know, children often, to get into this wonderland or this altered state, they have to pass through a very narrow aperture, whether it's Alice and the lock, you know, and the key that she has to slip through, or it's a closet or a wardrobe, or it's a well, you know, or a rabbit hole, something like that. And this is how Will has crafted his very provocative, explosive sort of movement against reality, but nevertheless through a very humble and seemingly innocent device, which is the idea of the note. So I'll just read the description quickly for you. He writes, written from a hospital bed on the outskirts of Romania, Max Blecher's Adventures in Immediate Irreality is a note from another world, one that becomes ours. Although it has taken almost 90 years to reach us, the immediate irreality that the text emerges from and that is intensified through its descriptions remains there for us to inhabit and expand upon. This seminar explores variations on the unique fusion of presence and projection that opens a space of immediate irreality, both immediately perceptible to the senses and moving beyond the presumed limits of the real. We will trace passages into the hallucinatory, the virtual, the elemental, the animal, and the spiritual in order to seek out and intensify their stirrings. And we will do so especially through perhaps the most humble, ubiquitous, and least likely medium, the note. While notes, written, voiced, sounded, sketched, imaged, performed, imply distance, separation, boundaries, and abbreviations, they also depend on unspoken affinities and are carried by open-ended and shared ephemerality. Notes from immediate irreality are evocations from elsewhere, inviting us to enter a space of collective fascination where our outlines and those of the world begin to blur. Moving forward, we then have a wonderful seminar planned by Lindsay Lerman, who's a very successful author of 2 novels, and also someone who's very interested in critical philosophy and is trained with some amazing people. And she has decided to stage a seminar, a 4-session seminar on non-knowledge, titled being Non-Knowledge, Introduction to Open Economies of Knowledge. You can see the 4 weeks there are divided into Session 1, Economies of Knowledge. Knowledge is a regime that structures thought. Session 2, Elements of Non-Knowledge. Session 3, Non-Knowledge is a third, Reconfiguring Epistemologies of Ignorance. And 4, Non-Knowledge and Technology. So while Will Scarlett's seminar looks through the lens of literature, and particularly the overlooked, overshadowed literary device of the note, here we're in the heart of philosophical inquiry, and sort of trying to attack reality through questions of knowing through certain philosophical schools. So just to read a part of the seminar description, Lindsay writes, "What might it mean to reject the assumption that knowledge is an acquirable good? What happens to our understanding of knowledge, utility, and meaning? How might these questions shed light on our individual thinking lives and our overlapping, overwhelming, and necessarily shared global techno-socio-political crises?" Present throughout George Bataille's entire oeuvre, yet largely unaddressed by Bataille scholars as a foundational aspect of his thought, non-knowledge is Bataille's radical ontological claim, put into practice in his writing and his life, that at the heart of all knowledge is the very absence of knowledge. Massively, if quietly influential in 20th and 21st century thought, Bataille's thinking seeks to understand waste and uselessness as integral aspects of human life, even and especially our thinking lives. If philosophy is to be of any interest, Bataille says, it, quote, must positively envisage the waste products of intellectual appropriation. So that's the seminar that she has proposed and that we'll be having. Moving on to my own 8-week seminar, I decided to go back to my childhood of the 1980s and stage something that I was just talking with Reza earlier about, before the session started, about lullabies and the genre of the lullaby. Kind of a complement to the power of lullabies are fantasy films. And I happened to grow up in the 1980s as a child when really I don't think they understood what a child's film was supposed to be. So there were many very dark, sort of sinister films, grave films with strange imagery that were produced in that time period that were not really for adults and not really for children either. They fell into some sort of third compartment that of the imagination that I wanted to go back to. And so my seminar for the term is on the child's imagination, studies in cinematic fantasy. You'll see that rather than philosophical or literary readings, we're watching films, starting with the film Labyrinth, looking at questions of violence and delight, and the film The Never-Ending Story, looking at concepts of innocence and vanishing, Legend, studies of magic and the inhuman, Time Bandits, Adventure and the Runaway, Willow, studies of fable and malformation, The Princess Bride, studies of humor and return, and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, studies of power and the absurd. And there are others actually that are slipped in there as well. But just to read very quickly part of the seminar description, it says, this seminar explores the strange contours of the child's imagination and its relation to the fantastical. How does childish fantasy entertain a mode of pretending that is neither pure dream nor nightmare, but rather something more exotically dangerous than both dimensions? To answer this, we will track the spaces and characters who haunt their visions through the prism of several iconic films of the 1980s, Labyrinth, The Never-Ending Story, and so on. But with references to others, I know people will blame me if I leave them out. Dark Crystal, Where the Wild Things Are, The Fantastic Mr. Fox, Alice in Wonderland, The Hobbit, Pan's Labyrinth, Wizard of Oz, Spirited Away. These excursions into the dark and light content of childlike perception will thereby allow us to radically alter our philosophies of innocence, fear, wish, and appearance. Moreover, their cinematic image worlds will come close to unlocking the child's attraction to eeriness, risk, malformation, secrecy, tantrum, wonderment, and desertion, all the while falling infinitely short as they remind us that these representations, these movies at the end of the day, just like children's literature, are still but the adult's imagination of the child's imagination. So the challenge that I wanted to launch here is to see if we could, through some humility, through some vulnerability, through some genuine tearing apart and decoding of our overburdened consciousness, if we could try and get at something closer to the pure fantastical consciousness of the child and what it might actually look like. Not what the psychoanalysts said about child psychology, not what philosophers have said about the child, although they constantly neglect the child for the most part, and not what literary figures have written in their narratives, which are really just vicarious or parasitic forms of wonderment of their own, trying to sort of jump on the child's shoulders in order to take them and transport them out of their everydayness. Instead, we're trying to get to the sort of the heart through their imagery. We'll see if we can get at some of those questions. And the last thing that I just wanted to share, even though this is still up in the air as to whether it will be offered this term or most likely right at the beginning of the next term, we've invited Thomas Mikal, an absolutely striking thinker about sort of urbanism, cities, architecture, and design. Brilliant figure, and he has devised a very special seminar for us on post-medieval derangements. It's also kind of it's kind of on medieval surrealism and then post-medieval surrealism and futuristic surrealism. So you can just see, without having to read the description yet, because I'll probably end up representing it later at our next session, you could just look at the table of contents and see what a maze of possibilities are here. Neurogothic subjectivity, Plotinus, the bifurcated soul and the bifurcated novum, soul vehicles, distributed psyches, substrates and superstructures, Gothic metaphysics, alien duration, cyber-goth ontology, neurogothic scenes on the logic of sense and nonsense in the Paradise Garden, the new carnivalesque in the dust of austerity, Hedgehook's angels, machines of loving graces, neurogothic excess, and it goes on and on and on. Uncanny landscapes, predatory ecologies, weeds are flowers out of place, neurogothic landscape, influencing machines, folk horror, the camera obscura, second sight, spirit photography, the tangency of worlds. This is something we could just drown in for days. Just the table of contents alone is a work of art. So again, you see that from four corners of the world and from four very different vantages, and time periods even, sort of the present, sort of the recent past, the medieval, the futuristic. These are all attempts to sabotage in a kind of lighthearted way the very premise of reality and the scaffolding of reality itself. So I'm looking forward, very much looking forward to this term. And, if four so-called horsemen can bring about the apocalypse, I'm hoping that the four of us might at least shake the foundation of things a little bit. But thank you.
Thank you, Jason. We're all really looking forward to these seminars. Now our programmer for critical philosophy, Reza Negarestani. He is a philosopher who has contributed extensively to journals and anthologies and lectured at numerous international universities and institutes. His current philosophical project is focused on rationalist universalism, beginning with the evolution of the modern system of knowledge and advancing toward contemporary philosophies of rationalism, their procedures, as well as their demands for special forms of human conduct. He's the author of Cyclonopedia, Intelligence and Spirit, and of the forthcoming collection of his writings titled Abducting the Outside, to be published by MIT Press and distributed by Urbanomic. Reza, please take it away.
Thank you so much, everyone. Hello, everyone. I cannot actually top up Jason's program at this point. And I would say what is necessary to be said, that philosophy is a goddamn boring business. But nevertheless, in that boringness we call philosophy, we try to be humble and we try to be hardworking. And maybe through that humility to understand philosophy in its proper bounds, we can reach out to different sort of adventures down the line. And I think for me, philosophy is really the name of that humility that opens up a path. A path made of wisdom, moderation, and ethical inquiry. The good news is that I convinced the great wolf to join us once again. Peter Wolfendale is coming to teach a new class at Critical Philosophy program, and his course is about value and extinction. Of course, that implicates Ray Brazier's work, but so as Martin Hogland's recent work, This Life, right? which is the defense of finitude, right? And Pete essentially wants to create a wedge between this sort of, I would say, misguided polarity. The value either comes from finitude or immortality. And by that immortality, of course, then Pete requires to, kind of classify various versions of all the stories about the accounts of self, souls, so on and so forth. And that's exactly what he's going to do, as always, such that he can hammer it in the great discussion of the meaning of the beautiful and the value in an axiological sense after the advent of the thought of extinction. So that would be Pete's new class, which I'm really happy that he's coming back and trying to teach a course. Then it would be JP's, JP Caron, Jean-Pierre is going to teach a course about the analytic reception of Hegel, right? Precisely because it seems as if in today's philosophy and analytic camps, certain sort of analytical camps, there is a very complicated marriage with Hegel. So typically, analytic philosophy staves off the threat of Hegelianism since the time of Russell, right? But it seems that today's analytic philosophy has a far more, kind of complicated relationship with Hegel's later works. And JP's task here is to essentially make a fundamental forensic philosophical profile of the relationship between analytic philosophy and the reception of Hegel. Then we have, another superstar, Dan Sasilato, whose book on Peruvian literature, and the indigenous literature came out just a few days ago. And of course, another book is coming that will be his philosophical work. So Dan is going to continue his class from the last seminar, which would be on the idea of philosophy as learning how to die at ease, right? And except that this time, the idea of Socratic death, and except that this time that Dan is going to talk about the middle and later dialogues, right? The point about Platonic dialogues is quite very specific, and people should understand that Republic is usually hailed as the greatest achievement of Plato, except that Plato himself doesn't believe that, right? If we take the idea of the so-called public lecture on the good, which is supposedly Plato at some point in his life, at his later life, gives a public lecture for the first time, talks in his own voice rather than meta characters like Socrates, Parmenides, and so on and so forth. He gives this lecture, and during this lecture, Plato introduces Republic as my most goddamn vulgar book that I have ever written, right? Whether this story is correct or not, that is not our business. Nevertheless, it kind of gives us an indication of what might be the shape of dialogues, their concerns and their contexts after the Republic, starting from Theaetetus to, the extremely mind-boggling works such as Parmenides, Philebus, and Timaeus. And Dan is essentially going to emphasize and focus on these sort of what you might call to be esoteric Plato, where Plato no longer make an apology about the corruption of the youth. He cannot apologize on behalf of poor Socrates that, Socrates died precisely because people mistook him as if he's giving this recipe of the good as God, right? That humans can be good precisely because humans can be gods, right? So these are the sort of dialogues where Plato come off as the most vicious heretic, the prophet of philosophy, almighty, where Plato, anything that he had said earlier, he now uses them to show that no, the good begins where the God ends, right? And that's the might of Plato at the end of the day. And so it would be interesting to hear what Dan is going to talk about with regard to these dialogues, precisely because of their heretic nature to orthodox Platonism, the vulgar Platonism that, every student of philosophy gets it in the 101, class. Then we have Anna. So I asked Anna that Anna, usually you talk about, axiomatics, philosophy of science, probabilism, and all the good technical stuff, right? But Anna, think about this. If you wanted to actually teach a course that you couldn't actually teach in academia, what do you actually want to teach? And she said, I want to teach a course about violence and transgression and prostitution. So here we have Anna's text on Pierre Kolosowski about the idea that, and she wants to make a twist because Anna is that sort of philosopher who goes through a certain sort of arch and then suddenly turns it back, turn it into a twisted problem. And so she wants to talk about the relation between prostitution, capitalism, philosophy, and literature. Selling the idea of the equation of bodies with currency, so to speak, right? So that would be Anna's course, which I'm really glad that she came up with this idea. And then we have Franziska, the greatest scholar of Kant that we have in our fold. And Franziska, so people who have taken her course know that, she's absolutely a stellar, a scholar of Kant. And this time she's going to talk about not the critique of pure reason, because critique of pure reason is usually what you might call to be entry to orthodox Kantianism. But rather, she wants to talk about the so-called third critique, power of judgment, emphasizing on one single puzzle. where Kant talks about dozen so things which he calls unruly stuff or unruly things. Things that are cannot be cognized or in terms of a priori can be talked about, but nevertheless we can make a sense out of these sort of unruly things. You know, the bugbears of philosophy, the beautiful thus and so, you know. And so she's going to emphasize on unruly things, you know, kind of to show the extent of Kantian philosophy once Kantian orthodoxy is being liberated from rather parochial epistemological concerns in the critique of pure reason. Then finally, I'm going to give a seminar about Hume. I mean, I knew Hume, but of course that would be just textbook Hume, right? I never actually, I read Hume, but it was my encounters with Hume was just like, you know, kind of like the stuff that you hear from Kant, from later people, but also Hume in a kind of wishy-washy sort of way. Except that the great thing about the COVID was that I finally started to engage with two old ghouls of philosophy, Descartes and Hume. And they are magnificent ghouls. I'm saying ghouls, not giants, because they eat people, right? That's a problem with these sort of people. And when I actually started to read Hume this time, it became obvious that all these sorts of, you know, kind of naive accounts of empiricism that we attribute to Hume are just totally misguided. That he has a certain sort of rationalist core. And you can say this also about Descartes, you know, he's supposed to be a rationalist philosopher, but he also has this dark empirical core. So I want to actually rebuild, you know, that sort of, again, debate between, you know, Humeans and Descartians, Cartesian philosophers, but not by subscribing anymore to the sort of, you know, hackneyed battles, Armageddonish battles that we have here, you know, in the history of philosophy about rationalism and empiricism. But backdoor contributions. So that's all I needed to say.
Thank you so much, Reza. Each of these seminars sound really exciting.
Thank you.
Now we move on to art and curatorial practice with Cécile Malaspina. She's the program director at the Paris International College of Philosophy, where she's also a member of the executive board. Cécile
Sorry to interrupt. No longer. I need to update.
Okay. So Cécile is a visiting fellow at King's College London, where her program for the CIPH is hosted by the Departments of Digital Humanities and the Department of French in association with the Center for Art and Philosophy. She is the author of An Epistemology of Noise and principal translator of Gilbert Simondon's On the Mode of Existence of Technical Objects, with the collaboration of Jean Rogoff. Cécile, over to you.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting. I am still at the Collège International de Philosophie, but I'm not in its executive board anymore. So since this is broadcast, I thought I need to update this. Also, for gratitude's sake, my seminars for that for the college are also hosted by the philosophy department of the University of the West of England. So thanks to them. I have to say, before I start presenting the seminars themselves, just the first thing, the astonishment of the kind of ecosystem of students that the New Center has created. The dialogues, the conversations, people come in from, I have to say, not only extremely different places everywhere in the world, very different practices, very different backgrounds, and very different moments in their career, with this super intense desire to look through the cracks. I have really, this has been the complete revelation for me, the kind of, and the way they come together and the conversations we have, and this has been really fantastic. The other thing, obviously, is that I want to be a student of the New Center. I want to listen to all of the seminars you just presented, and my only misgiving is that I would have liked to come up with them myself. So yeah, fantastic upcoming programs, and I can also anticipate that Ed Keller is also going to come and be one of the guest speakers in one of the programs I'm going to present next. So I hope that we're going to do some more cross-fertilizations between the programs, which already have so much resonance. And I'll start by saying something about the nature of this program. I'm not a curator, I'm not an artist, and I'm running the program for art and curating. And when Mo asked me, I said, look, I'm not a curator, I'm not an artist. He said, yeah, I know, we know what you're doing, and that's why we want you. So what I do, I have a slightly different approach to philosophy. I have adopted the maxim of Georges Canguilhem, who said the philosopher is indiscreet everywhere. So it's a philosophy out of bounds, if you like. And I like oblique approaches. I think that we don't talk always or very much about art and curating in the art and curatorial program. And this is because I think that often when you try to approach a problem directly, first of all, you have to use concepts that are already functional, without which you can't talk about your normal practices. And second of all, you can't see the elephant in the room. So I think that sometimes to look at a problem through an analogous field can be like a prism that casts a kind of strange light. And in that strange light, things that look natural to you, the words you use, the concepts you use, suddenly become not only problematical, but also sometimes you open up new ways of using them and engineering them together. So starting with one of these is the concept of techne. So we have, we're doing the second iteration of a seminar series that was had fantastic contributions by guest speakers in the last seminar, called Techne Beyond Monoculture. So in this seminar, the inspiration for it was really a presentation I saw by two Japanese shokunin, or master craftsmen, Shuji Nakagawa and Takahiro Yagi, at the Japan House in London in June 2022. And in the conversations that were happening after the presentations, what came to the fore was this idea that the crafts not only the craftsmen themselves, these high craftsmen themselves, are collaborating with industries, with high tech, with a kind of techno-scientific rationality that you wouldn't normally associate with a person who's in their kind of old-fashioned craft studio, and at the same time a narrative that valued the crafts by saying, okay, this is to value our culture, our national culture, our regional culture. We must preserve this. But when you put these two perspectives together, they don't work. They don't work. Why? Because the materials you use, for example, the tin that was used for these beautiful, kind of almost mechanical tea containers, comes from mines, or used to come in the 19th century from mines in Britain. So there's a whole logistics, industrial logistics, global planetary industrial logistics, and standardized practices and technical milieu, you could say, that is necessary for the crafts to exist in the way that they do, or not for all crafts, of course, by any means, but there is an intersection of creativity that's happening there that made me think, is there a way of thinking about not only technology or what we normally criticize as techno-scientific rationality, or what in the kind of Frankfurt School, especially Herbert Marcuse's way of sometimes sounding almost as if you, as if this is the bad guys, techno-scientific rationality, when in fact what you want is you want to have a techno-scientific rationality that is put to use for the common good and for processes of emancipation, and not in service of the kind of monoculture that we, a kind of capitalist monoculture, global monoculture that we associate with techno-scientific rationality. So I wanted to turn around this problem of techno-scientific rationality, starting with the concept of techne, going back to its, peeling back like an onion, if you like, the layers of what we understand to be technology, go back to the concept of techne, and open up the discussion again of the different aspects of techne. So we've had a fantastic lineup of speakers, and we found that we barely scratched the surface. So we're continuing, and hopefully we're going to have more iterations of this with some really extraordinary speakers for this round. DeForest Brown, Ed Keller from the New Center, Rosa Menkman, Beatrice Fazi, Joshua Augustus Basigalupi, and Shazin Wei. So this is something I'm very much looking forward to. Then we have a second seminar, which is also a continuation of, where is it gone? Of a previous seminar called Variations on the Great Refusal. The idea for this seminar started with a seminar I gave myself. This wasn't one with guest speakers, or was it? I can't remember. We did have guest speakers. Sorry, I take that back. I did give a couple of the lectures myself, and this took as its starting point the idea of the great refusal in emancipatory movements in Herbert Marcuse and Eros in Civilization. And what I found is that when you look at the concept of the great refusal, which he takes from Alfred North Whitehead, you fall through a kind of Alice in Wonderland loophole into a really weird theoretical environment, which I found totally fascinating. And not only there, but there's another false kind of flap that you can open, and you go all the way back to the eruption of this term, the Great Refusal, to Dante Alighieri's Introduction to the Inferno, to his third canto, where he describes the people who are trapped in the antechamber to hell as those who live a life without praise or blame. And the Great Refusal, in that sense, is totally the opposite from what Marcuse means, although he's not wrong to interpret Whitehead in the way that he does. But with Dante, you have this idea of the person who is in front of a historical situation that calls on them to measure up, to step up, and who has the kind of cowardice of saying, well, I prefer, maybe I'm too humble. Who am I to do this? And whose cowardice has great consequences, but won't be remembered as an act. So it's a kind of the great refusal, the person who's remembered only as a forsaken soul or shadow. Now, what's very interesting is that in Whitehead, you have a tipping point, a kind of ambivalence. The great refusal is then two different things. On the one hand, it's the great refusal of those who are happy with their epistemic framework, those who are happy with the kind of bodies of knowledge that they produce, and who refuse, or in fact, the examples that he gives is also dogmatism from religion, or it's basically a leap to find a shortcut to the explanation of something that leaves us perplexed. And he says, this is the great refusal of granting rationality its full rights. And the really fascinating thing, and I wish I had encountered Whitehead when I was 20 and not now. I think he would have become a kind of life project for me. He's a fantastic thinker. The really interesting thing starts when you try to understand what he means by the other great refusal, the great refusal that is refusing the first refusal. And so it's a bit complicated to get into this here now. But on the basis of these variations of the Great Refusal, we've decided to make further iterations of this seminar series and call this Thinking in Times of Crisis. So we're going to see how this, the ambivalence of this thinking about the Great Refusal can illuminate some of the difficulties that we encounter when we have to think in situations of crisis. So I have invited Vali Amaluji, who is going to talk about system making and exhibition making in crisis. So he's going to have 4 sessions in which he considers the ethics and politics of refusing and refuting dominant and hegemonic histories in favor of intentionally marginalized, condemned, obscured, and precarious art histories. Forms of curatorial, this is what's going on here, sorry. Forms of curatorial resistance will be considered in imagining alternative ways of looking at reality and taking a leap of faith into new ways of looking at situations, conflicts, and narrativization of histories. So his seminar will speculate on future emancipations through models and strategies of refusal and dismantlement of concrete praxis of conventional forms of thought, practice, representation, or interpretation. Central to his mission is a mission really for him, because I'll explain in a second who he is. So this is really integral also to his overall project as a curator and artist. So central to his mission is the consideration of forensic investigations, constructive system makings, and performative counteractions toward new knowledge infrastructures in order to escape, bypass, or refute pre-existing knowledge systems. So Vali Maluji is an art curator, advisor to the British Museum, Art Dubai, Tate Modern, Bahman Mohaghegh Estate, and he's the director of the Kave Golestan Estate. And he's also the founder of Archaeology of the Final Decade, a non-profit research and cultural platform that recovers traumatized, violated, erased, dispossessed, and obscured histories. So I think this is a really fantastic way to continue this theme of the Great Refusal. And he's going to take, I think, as a kind of red thread running through his sessions, the events that are unfolding in Iran. So I've set myself a pretty daunting task, because obviously this idea of thinking in situations of crisis is going to not be able to spare itself situations that are difficult to talk about, difficult to think about. And I was hesitant for a moment. I thought, if you open Pandora's box, you can't really step back from this. And then I thought, this is exactly what we need to do. And we'll try and find the most intelligent way of doing this without just making the wrong kind of noise. So we also have another seminar that I'm very excited to have in my program. And this is going to be run by Yumi. Yumi is a professor of art and economies at the University of Kassel Documenta Institute. And prior to joining Kassel, she was a research associate in art and media studies at the Academy of Media Arts Cologne. She's going to be doing this seminar together with Gary Zeji Zhang. I hope I did okay with the pronunciation here, who is a visual artist and writer, and whose work explores social infrastructures, technical histories, and conceptual systems. He was born in China and grew up in Birmingham and is currently based in London. So hopefully I'll get a chance to meet him as well. This is where I am based as well. And he studied at Glasgow School of Art and Cambridge University, MIT. So their seminar, I'll read it out, is called Introduction to Cybernetics and China. Cybernetics, or control theory, as it is known in Chinese, rose to prominence in the middle of the 20th century as the syncretic, philosophical, social, and technical language of feedback systems. While the background of its founding figures in the United States, from Norbert Wiener to Gregory Bateson, are well studied, less is known about the lineage of cybernetics in China. This seminar will begin by focusing on the life and work of Kian Suezen. I hope, apologies, I don't know how, I'm not entirely sure if I'm pronouncing this right, the key protagonist of cybernetics in China, and his trajectory from being an engineer of ballistic systems to his influence as a theorist and of social, ecological, and industrial systems. Alongside his work as a mathematician and engineer, the later Kian Suezen was also a strong advocate of Qigong and paranormal research. Through Kian, we will examine the influence of cybernetic thought and its diffusion on the 20th century China in events such as the efforts to redesign the agrarian economy during the Great Leap Forward, and discourses around population modeling and control that underpinned the one-child policy. They will then broaden the scope to consider China's experience of cybernetic thought as an expression of the organic materialism, an expression by Needham, found in the history of Chinese science and Taoism. As in the United States and the Soviet Union, the figure of cybernetics in China faded away towards the end of the 20th century through its subsumption into other social and scientific disciplines. We will explore the presence of they will explore the presence of cybernetics in Chinese scientific discourse and science fiction of the 1980s, approaches to AI research and international relations. So I hope I kind of shared with you the enthusiasm, the excitement I have for these sessions. I'm looking forward to the sessions not only in my own program, but also to yours.
These are some fantastic seminars lined up. Thank you so much, Cécile. Presenting next is Ed Keller for Post-Planetary Universal Design. Ed and Carla, who couldn't make it here today, are the founders of AUM Studio and Spec AE, which joined the Data Matter group show at the Venice Biennale in 2018. They have convened over 20 international conferences and lecture series. Their work and writing has appeared in Volume, Punctum, Triple Ampersand, Evolo, A+U, and many others. Ed is a designer, professor, writer, musician, multimedia artist, and independent scholar. From 2012 to 2020, he was the director of the Center for Transformative Media at the New School. And from 2010 to 12, he served as Associate Dean at Parsons College. He has spoken on architecture, film, AI, technology, and ecology internationally. He has also recently conducted seminars at Parsons on topics such as post-planetary design, soundscape, and designing AI. Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anshul. Thanks, everybody. Like Cécile, I just feel such a tremendous excitement for all the offerings that everyone has lined up for this season. You know, in terms of the Great Refusal and the Great Refusal of the Great Refusal, there's this beautiful passage that some of you probably know from Julio Cortázar in his novel Hopscotch, where he says, yes, but who will cure us of the dull fire, the colorless fire that at nightfall runs along the Rue de la Huchette, emerging from the crumbling doorways, to burn like this without surcease, to bear the inner burning, coming on like fruits quick ripening, to be the pulse of a bonfire in this thicket of endless stone, walking through the nights of our life, obedient as blood in its blind circuit. It would seem that a choice cannot be dialectical, that the fact of bringing it up impoverishes it. Why surrender to great habit? One can choose his chore, his invention. But then he finishes that notorious chapter in Hopscotch by saying, we burn within our work fabulous mortal honor, high challenge of the phoenix. No one will cure us of the dull fire, the colorless fire that at nightfall runs along the Rue de la Huchette. Incurable, perfectly incurable, we invent our conflagration. We burn outwardly from within. And I just Cécile, I was just thinking about the refusal of the refusal. And for me, Cortázar always props up in this very beautiful way as someone who's aware of, the kind of paradox of the refusal and then the need to turn again within oneself one more time. So I'll just talk a little bit about the Postplanetary Universal Design Program and a few things we've done, and then line up some of the courses we have in front of us. I think they resonate a lot with many of the other offerings. The kind of cross postings are fantastic. Some of the things that we have lined up later in the year, Reza, I think will have a very nice kind of engagement with the puissance of the non-human that I know you're working on. And Jason, I couldn't help but thinking that as you introduced transdisciplinary with the idea of writing for one's own shadow, that it's just so much a part of everything that I feel like I'm always doing. So there's so many beautiful kind of cross-fertilizations and echoes and affiliations of sense and sensibility here that are beautiful. Carla can't be here today, and she does regret that she can't join. Just to unpack her background a little bit, she's an architect licensed in Europe. She's currently a full-time faculty at Rensselaer Polytechnic, where she teaches advanced design studios in history and theory in the architecture program there. And we are the principals and founders of our practice together, which is Spec AE and AUM Studio. Partly we do speculative design research, and partly we are building architects with residential projects in Europe and ongoing work, always looking for the intersections between technology, architecture, cities, and increasingly architecture's relationship to artificial intelligence. So what's the Postplanetary Universal Design Program? It's a hybrid seminar and sort of mini research studio curriculum. And we launch it from architecture as a core discipline, but of course it's in no way restricted to architecture, in part because of the way that the program is structured, and in part because neither Carla nor I think of ourselves as architects with a capital A. We've always been a little bit against architecture, to steal a line from Denis Hollier. What are we working on by thinking through the implications of the postplanetary and universal design? I think we're asking where design fits in the broader frame of thinking the planet and thinking beyond the scale of the planet, and asking what the remit for design is if we assign it a universal aspiration, not only for humans, but beyond and below the human for the totality of the planet. I'm thinking of design as an amplifier or an attenuator for the planetary and the broad spectrum codex of our historical and material and socio-technical configurations. Architecture always operates across these different temporal schematas, the moment, the gesture, the second, through the epoch, the eon, and the presence of a building or a part of a city or a city connects to ecosystems. And historically, architecture will capture and fix and transmit the stable configurations of past organizations into the future. But what we're interested in postplanetary is the socio-geopolitical technical instrumentation today, which is demanding of us novel engagements and offering us novel resistances to the previous ways that architecture and design in general would temporally operate. So we want to project into alternate configurations of the future and the past. What have we been looking at in the past couple of years at the New Center? We've had folks like Ezio Blazzetti and Daniel Willems teach courses on programmed ontologies, which was looking at quite technically adaptive algorithmic systems and coded worlds. We've had Stephanie Wakefield come in and talk about Anthropocene design, looking at urban adaptation, infrastructural islandization, attempted off-planet exploration, all part of a critical analysis of crisis discourse in her course. We've had survey seminars like the Atmosphere Seminar, which brought Amanda Beach and Elise Misau-Hunchak and Nandita Biswas-Malamfi in to talk about radically expanded concepts of envelope as buffers, as thresholds, as strata, as layers, as mediums, as shells, as backgrounds. And we've been teaching many design studios, Carla and myself, the World Design Studio, which was Studio 1, the Cosmos Design Studio, Studio 2, and currently running Studio 3, the Cosmological Brain Studio. And in each of these, given that we have 8 seminar sessions, it's not really a full studio. A full studio would be something like 40 sessions or 45 sessions. So what we're doing is we're looking for ways that across the arc of the year in postplanetary, with folks who are in the certificate program and folks who are just dipping their toes in, we can build a kind of a consistency across a year-long program to ask questions like, what are the tensions between codex of preservation, socioculturally, or rituals of conflagration in architecture? What might be an operational new nature? And when would architecture transform into landscape and extend beyond a horizon and link to systems again off planet to catalyze a revolutionary universality? Or to ask in the research studio we're doing right now, the Cosmological Brain Studio, what would be the socio-political genetics or the pedagogies of a general economy? And what environmental controls would be necessary to build a cosmopolitically inclined brain? What kind of infrastructural captures of attention that are currently in operation could lead towards, if you're an optimist, or away from a general cosmopolitical agency of mind? And what gestural ecologies, to use Nandita Biswas-Malamphy's term, might we deploy in our work as designers of the planet and for the planet? What universalist notions, to draw on perhaps Aldo Leopold's work in Sankonte Almanac, would lead to forms of radical empathy and mutualism and shared ontologies? So these are some of the themes that we've been thinking about for the past couple of years. We have some really exciting offerings lined up for the coming session. We have a survey seminar called Open Worlds, Universal Design, Geopolitics of the Multiverse. And we have 4 fantastic guest lecturers, actually 5, but 4 team lectures. Marcos Novak, architect, digital designer, and thinker. Lydia Kalapalidi, architect, engineer, historian. Gillian Crandall, architect. Everyone is a faculty, so I won't say they're professors. Everyone's a professor. Gillian Crandall, an architect, and currently working intensively on the ethics and morals of the blockchain in relationship to architecture and infrastructure. And Ezio Blazzetti and Daniel Willems are going to join us again from Meta Design. The remit for Open Worlds Universal Design is to ask what the impact of AI and blockchain will be on emerging infrastructure and on the kind of world makings that take place within emerging infrastructure. And we are offering a specific provocation to ask what the role of open world and universal design thinking might be here. Specifically for Lydia, this will be an interesting challenge because she, of course, wrote a terrific book called Closed Worlds. The exact title of that book was The Architecture of Closed Worlds, or What is the Power of Shit? And of course, Lydia was thinking very beautifully in that particular book on the problems of recycling of energy and information within a closed system. So we're gonna offer this provocation to Lydia, Marcos, Gillian, Ezio, and Danielle to get them thinking a bit about, for example, what might be at stake when we design metaverses or multiverses from an open world perspective, and how psychopolitics is invoked. And indeed, the problem, as you're all aware, when we think of psychopolitics today, is we contrast it with the low resolution models and knowledges of neurocapture that we've dealt with historically for centuries. But today we face the literally microsecond and millisecond fine-tuned engagement with literally hundreds of millions of mind sense nets being surveilled and captured at once. So we're going to take up these themes in the context of each of their work, Marcos's, Lydia's, Gillian, Ezio, and Danielle's. And we're going to speculate on tactics and strategies that could resist some of these forms of capture. And of course, the open world is a hypothetical that we've offered them as a challenge to say, do open worlds really lead us away from some of these problems of capture? Or does the model of the open world lead us away? And quite specifically, also the work that folks like Ben Goertzel at SingularityNet are doing right now to turn to open worlds as a model to build playgrounds for baby artificial intelligences to grow up in, the pedagogies that we're literally in the midst of designing right now for non-human intelligence. The second seminar will be offered by Cécile Malaspina, wonderful colleague and close friend. His seminar is titled The Age of Computational Desire Toward a New History of Culture in the 2020s. And I'll read the brief that Cécile wrote for his seminar. He says, by 2005, postmodernism had outlived its usefulness as a theoretical concept for understanding the present. Instead, others suggested network culture and metamodernism as new frameworks to understand a period in which the internet became central to everyday life, culture, and economy. By 2010, it was clear to thinkers interested in the subject that network culture would last a decade, after which a new constellation would take hold. This seminar sketches the technological outlines of the post-COVID era. Old corporate models of network culture, characterized by the 5 most prominent global technology corps, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, the FANG, are decaying. Cryptocurrencies are questioned and devalued as we see the rapid rise of various forms of AI that, as yet, have no capacity for inherent cognition, but uncannily predict the relationship of immediately adjacent or related elements. This seminar probes the consequences of these transformations, tracking how the very structure of networks transformed political forms and discourses. The seminar asks, can a new political order be constructed around these shifting technological structures? What will this new era's markets and economies look like? And in 4 sessions, 1, from postmodernism to network culture, Marx, Jameson, and the concept of totality. 2, network theory, social networks, the perils of influence and the promises of decentralization. 3, artificial intelligences and computational desire, or Hegel and singularity. And 4, jackpot theory, from dark accelerationism to angelicism. And when Cécile says jackpot theory, he's drawing that term quite specifically from William Gibson in his recent novels, talking about the singularity as a, quote, catastrophic jackpot with billions of deaths. So Cécile is gonna take all of this up. And for those of you who don't know, Cécile is trained as an architectural historian, doing his PhD work at Cornell. He was a professor at SciArc in California for many years, and at other universities, Columbia University, where he ran a center for a number of years, as well in the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. So we're really, really delighted and honored that Cécile can join us this year. And then the third seminar will be a distributed cognition and the ultra-conserved gesture topic. And this is still coming into focus, but this is being developed out of the recent work that I've been looking at. Most likely, this will be a seminar that I teach with some invited guests, and it'll be a 4-session seminar. We're going to focus on this problem of distributed cognition and the ultra-conserved gesture in the context of an emerging cosmopolitics. And this phrase, which has been stuck in my head for a few years, the ultra-conserved gesture in relationship to cosmopolitics, needs explanation. So what's driving this seminar? As we consider languages today and communications with artificial intelligence, because the infrastructures around Midjourney and ChatGPT, Dream Studio, DALL-E, they're all oriented towards communication between, putatively, us as humans and an emerging synthetic intelligence. Also extraterrestrial intelligence, but I'll get to that in a moment. There are a whole series of questions which leap forth out of this. What constitutes symbolic thinking and language generally, or emergent language, or embedded, or quasi or pseudo languages, and what's the use of them? So for example, Oberhaus's book, Extraterrestrial Language, takes up these problems in a very beautiful way underneath the challenge of what it would mean for humans to design to communicate with, quite literally, aliens, going back through Sagan and many others, even back to Leibniz and Spinoza. And the problem of developing a linguistics or a communicative model to reach a radically non-human mind. Yeah, and so this is really, as you can tell from the notion of distributed cognition and cosmopolitics, what's driving the seminar. But the ultra-conserved gesture fits in here in a very important way. We look at the question of ultra-conserved linguistic components, and you've all heard the sort of pop culture headlines around the 20 or 30 words that have been ultra-conserved for 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 years or more. And there are plenty of arguments that we can raise around whether they really have been ultra-conserved, because the meaning shifts over that many thousands of years. The pronunciation shifts, the graphism of the writing of the words shift. But if we take that as a starting point, the notion of the ultra-conserved language or the ultra-conserved word or phrase, and then we apply it across in a Ballardian way, a range of other different substrates to gesture, and ask what the extended notion of gesture might be, then that's what's driving this seminar. We're going to be looking for this problem of communication with the non-human, both in the symbolic, the semantic, the linguistic, and the subsymbolic, but also in the gestural. And we're going to have recourse to draw on Oberhaus's book on extraterrestrial languages. We're going to look at some of the examples that Oberhaus cites. For example, Alexander Ollengren, who was a prominent developer in the research field of astrolinguistics, and proposed, for example, in an extension of Linkos, that instead of trying to build a universal language or a self-compiling language that we would send to the aliens, we would send them music, for example, Balinese gamelan, and we would send them an annotation system, which would be self-compiling, metadata, annotation, notation, and abstraction as a companion to the artifact itself, which would be viable as a mode of realizing communication. And so we could, of course, choose any other information-rich system. It doesn't have to be Balinese gamelan. It could be language itself. It could be pictorial. It could be gestural, and then annotate that information package. So this is a very interesting question that's at the core of the large language model and foundational model, let's say, arguments that are taking place in artificial intelligence development today. Many of you have played with ChatGPT. Many of you have read Jan LeCun and Gary Marx's arguments, Ben Gertz's arguments around this. Can language be a proper pathway to building something like a quasi-human intelligence? And the argument that we'll take up in this course will be, are there alternatives to language or companions to language? What might they be? What's the role of gesture? And then hand in hand with that, pun intended, we might ask, where does thinking take place? In the body, what does it mean to embody cognition or embody computation? How does current infrastructure building around ChatGPT, search, Dream Studio, Midjourney, and so forth actually connect to a kind of deeper ecosystemic thinking about systems intelligence? And what kind of ethics do we need to deal with, and what kind of agencies are afforded both to the emerging intelligences, but also afforded to us? And this, of course, links back to some of the preoccupations in the other courses that Kazis is running, and the Open Worlds Universal Design course, which does take up the geopolitics of the multiverse. So that's a kind of a broad umbrella to close with the courses that we have lined up coming up in the next season. And again, can't say enough how excited I am to be doing this with the new center and with all of you, and also how fantastic the dialogue is in the courses that we've been running for the past few years. They're super challenging, engaged, wide-thinking discussions. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ed. Of course, we are. I'm a part of the. Yeah, Cécile.
I forgot to mention very importantly that some of the amazing seminars will be also cross-listed, and notably the Child's Imagination by Jason is cross-listed also to the Arts and Curatorial Program, as well as Money, Desire, and the Body by Anna Longo, and Notes from Immediate Irreality by Will Scarlett. So I forgot to mention that earlier.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was saying that we are discussing some of these questions that you just mentioned in Cosmological Brain, but I think it would be very exciting to also delve deeper into them in the coming seminars. And with that, we conclude presentations on upcoming seminars. You can find information about all these on our website, which will be up and running soon. This semester in particular, we are also offering for the first time a practical workshop, which our student services representative, Rafael, will tell us more about, alongside some FAQs about applications.
Thank you very much, Anchal, and thanks everybody who's watching and hanging tight with us in this live. So first of all, this practical writing workshop came from an idea we had a few semesters ago, in which we were talking about basically how online learning and this future of academia involves many, like a myriad of skills that maybe are not necessarily being taught in a straightforward way in academia. And we I think there are many examples of it. So from technical skills of dealing with different platforms and putting knowledge into different platforms, as well as new and novel forms of writing and so on, focusing on theory fiction, and many different perspectives on that. And even if you really think about it, how do you present, how to make a presentation and everything like that. So we decided to address one particular issue, which was interested all of us, which was to have a practical writing workshop, which is formulated by Ross McEwen and Shiona Tragaskis. Ross, for those of you who follow the News Center, was the responsible for the class on DAOs. And he works alongside with Shiona in their DAO-based publishing house called Impossible Object. And they have hosted many interesting seminar series of talks and everything. And they are going to offer a workshop, which is entirely focused on techniques and processes for writing fiction, theory and theory fiction. And it's going to be a very hands-on approach in which people will be basically submitting works for feedback, working with colleagues and everything during the duration of that seminar. And it's also a very long, a much lengthier seminar with breaks in between, so people can actually take the time to practice writing very intensely and then have a moment of introspection and revision, which they can work in other writing projects, and then hopefully to get at the end of the seminar with a finished good picture of the writing project that they want to develop in it. And yeah, so this is also a practical writing workshop. This of course involves skills that traverse all of the programs. So it's listed as under all of the programs. And yes, so we just a final reminder for you before we move to the FAQ is that our applications to register for certificate scholarship applications are open until February 20th. And by applying, you have the possibility of receiving partial and also full scholarships. And I'm going to post the link on the chat for the application form, which you can submit applications and everything while our website is not back. And before wrapping up, and I know that applications are a big driver of anxiety for a lot of people, and I have been responding to a few of you through email, through student services at thenewscenter.org. But I would like to just address a few frequently asked questions for those of you who are thinking about applying or who are right now filling your application. So I think that a first one, which is about what is exactly who is a certificate in one of these programs for, basically. And I'm happy to say that we have students from many backgrounds, as Cécile and Ivana has mentioned when talking about their own seminars. And we see the certificate as a space of developing both your own interests together with these new forms of seminars and training that you have access to in the seminars, in the seminar sessions and everything. It's also a chance of expanding your network and also transitioning from different areas. So from a more philosophy to art or vice versa, or between all of these areas which we have contemplated. And also we have people from backgrounds in technology and science who have interest in the humanities and want to really talk about their own experience working with these mediums and theorizing about them and everything. And we have students from all ages, places, and walks of life, from people who are already professors at local universities or who have established artistic practices, to people who are just living, finishing an undergraduate or a master's, or people who are in between degrees and still figuring out what they want to do. So yeah, I think that if you're interested in these themes, all of these would be interesting for you. And for completing a certificate program, which is also something that people ask us a lot, we have basically two sets of requirements. We ask for 10 seminar credits, fulfilling 10 seminar credits within a year. which means 2 seasons. We usually announce them in seasons, which is, for example, if you join this season, you would have until fall, winter 23, you would have until this fall, winter, the end of fall, winter 2023, 2024 to finish your seminar credits, and then another year to finish your final work, which can be a writing project, an exhibition, and any of these. We basically want to really integrate the new center within your own practice. And each seminar is completed by achieving a certain grades, and you get graded for attendance, group presentations, participation in class, and also delivering a final work. And after you have these, although we do request that you complete 10 credits for the seminars, we also have the possibility of taking more of these credits if you're interested in them during your first year. And also for those who have difficulties, perhaps dealing with that working time, we also have the option of working and perhaps distributing them better. Basically, we are really attentive to each of the students on concerns and everything, and we try to be as malleable as possible to make sure that everybody can pursue their education in their own terms. And yes, about that, we for completing your final work, you're going to have 2 individual consultancies with one of the programmers of your choice, which could be Jason, Cécile, Ed, and Carla, or Reza, depending on the program where you're allocated. And you also have to do at least one consultancy with Mohamed Salemi, our organizer. And but Mohamed Salemi, you can do more consultancies if you feel the need to, because they can go from career recommendations to student affairs and everything. But other consultancies are more focused on the completion of the final work. And another question I get asked a lot is about time balance and how to conciliate the new center and your current work and practice and everything. I have already told a little bit about this malleability we have, both with the credits and also with the fact that we try to place all the seminars during the weekends, and we try to be as malleable as possible if you're interested in a seminar that you can actually attend and complete it. And we usually have students who are in between degrees, people with part-time or even full-time jobs. And we also have we usually, as we give you 1 entire year to complete the 10 credits for seminars, there is quite a bit of time to distribute your time so that you do not get overwhelmed by too many demands and everything. So this is also something that, although people get very concerned about, there is a lot of room to maneuver because the seminars are spread throughout the semester. And if you get too many time constraints, you don't even have to take too many seminars at the same time. You can distribute your time in that regard. And lastly, about the scholarship eligibility and the application documents, as it is in our form, we usually ask for a letter of intent and a writing sample. Neither of them have any harsh constraints, but we usually recommend that the letter of intent, which is usually about both your interest in the new center and also your financial constraints for requesting a scholarship, to be around 2 pages lengthwise maximum. And for the writing sample, we usually recommend that you send something that you believe that reproduces your interest and also displays your skill and interest in theory writing. It can be a part of a thesis, it can be a text art review, it can be in any form that sort of matches your interest and that you believe this sort of summarizes the scope of our interest the best. Of course, we understand that for many of us in between degrees and careers, you might not always have something 100% that translates what you believe or your theoretical choices and all, but actually, but we are open to that as well. It's just something that mildly represents what you have been working on or where do you come from even. So there is no need to worry too much about this and all. Last, about this, I would like to remind everybody that if we are hosting a seminar series starting this weekend, which is entirely free of charge, and all of you can attend if you registered on the form that I'm going to put on the chat. The series is titled Andrew Birkin Saying, Computational Theater and the After Image of Social Media, and it is a research project by Malcolm Turner and Dan Young, which is established to produce a work of experimental cinema about social media in general and Twitter in particular. And it will feature a series of guests who will be exploring the connection between social media and cinema, both in terms of the aesthetic appeal of both of them, the impact each of them has on the attention span, the aesthetic forms that each of them allow or not, and how both of these media experiences are related in our current conjuncture. And guests for these sessions include Reza Negarestani, our programmer who's here with us, Ganael Langlois, Hussein Darakshan, our board member, Julieta Aranda, and our instructor, Ana Longo, who's offering also a seminar this season about Klosowski, which Reza has spoken about, and Roxana Panchazi. And all these 6 sessions will take place on Saturdays, starting on this Saturday on February 18. And if you wish to attend, you can register in this form that we are going to put on the chat for you in a bit. And yes, that's it from my end. I wish all of you a very good luck in the application process. Make sure you relax while applying and read your application once again, but also make sure that you submit it and that you submit it within the deadline. And let me know if you do have any follow-up questions to anything that I have been talking about here. Please contact me at studentservices@thenewscenter.org, and I'll be happy to respond to you. And because I know this is also many other questions can emerge and everything, and I'm pretty sure I didn't cover everything. So thank you very much for being here in the live. I'm going to pass the word back to Anchal for closing the session.
Thank you so much, Rafael. That is super helpful. That is all from our end. I think I would just like to thank all the programmers for guiding us through the upcoming seminars, and to everybody who's attending, thank you so much for your time and your attention. I look forward to seeing you in the seminars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.